In this episode, we are taking a step back from the exam itself so you can understand the organization behind it and the resources that can make your preparation more focused, calmer, and more effective. The Information Systems Audit and Control Association, ISACA, is not just a name printed on an exam page, because it shapes the certification, the expectations around professional knowledge, and the broader community connected to this field. For a beginner, that matters more than it may seem at first, since people often jump straight into studying sample questions without understanding who built the certification or why certain topics keep appearing. When you understand the source, the exam starts to feel less mysterious and more deliberate. That change in perspective helps because good preparation is not only about working hard. It is also about knowing which materials deserve your attention, how they fit together, and why some resources build real understanding while others only create the illusion of progress. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. ISACA is a professional association that has long been connected to information systems auditing, governance, risk, and related areas of technology oversight. That description may sound formal, but the simple version is that it serves professionals who need to understand whether technology is being managed responsibly, whether controls are effective, and whether organizations can support their claims with evidence. This makes the association important to CISA candidates because the exam is not floating in space without context. It comes from a professional environment that values consistency, discipline, ethics, and business awareness alongside technical understanding. In other words, the certification reflects the mindset of a field, not just a collection of memorized facts. When beginners recognize that, they stop seeing study materials as random content and start seeing them as pieces of a larger professional conversation about trust, accountability, and how organizations manage systems that matter. That connection between the organization and the certification is important because it explains why the exam tends to focus on judgment, control thinking, and business impact rather than deep configuration detail. ISACA is concerned with how information systems support the enterprise, how risk is understood, how governance influences decisions, and how assurance work provides confidence to leadership. Because of that, the resources tied to the exam usually emphasize concepts, relationships, and decision-making rather than narrow technical tricks. A beginner may wonder why a question seems more interested in the best action, the strongest evidence, or the most important concern than in a technical shortcut. The reason is that the certification is designed for a role that examines systems and context. Once you understand the values and priorities behind the exam, the materials start to make more sense, and you become less likely to study in a way that is disconnected from what the test is actually measuring. One of the most useful reasons to understand ISACA early is that it helps you trust some sources more than others. New learners often search online, find a flood of videos, summaries, flashcards, and question collections, and assume all of them are equally helpful if they mention the same certification. That can create confusion because different resources may vary widely in accuracy, depth, tone, and alignment with the exam's real expectations. Some materials are strong for review but weak for first learning. Others sound confident while oversimplifying important distinctions or teaching a habit of guessing without understanding. When you know that the exam comes from a professional association with its own established perspective, you are more likely to anchor your preparation in resources that reflect that perspective. That does not mean every useful study tool must come directly from ISACA, but it does mean the best outside materials usually work well because they stay close to the concepts, language, and reasoning style that the association promotes. For most candidates, one of the first key resources is the basic information that explains the exam itself. This includes the current exam content areas, eligibility expectations, registration details, testing policies, and other candidate-facing materials that show how the certification is framed. Beginners sometimes skip this kind of reading because it feels administrative rather than educational, but that is a mistake. These materials tell you what the exam is trying to cover, how the content is grouped, and what rules shape the testing experience. They can also reduce anxiety because uncertainty often comes from not knowing how the process works. When you read the exam information carefully, you begin to replace vague worry with specific understanding. That makes the entire study effort more grounded, since you are no longer preparing for a mysterious event. You are preparing for a defined assessment with known content areas, known policies, and a clear relationship to a professional body of knowledge. Another key resource category is the content outline that shows the major domains of knowledge covered by the exam. This resource is valuable because it gives you a map, and most beginners need a map more than they need more material. Without one, every topic can feel equally important, and study time gets spread too thin across too many disconnected ideas. A content outline helps you see the major buckets of knowledge and how the exam expects them to live side by side. It tells you, at a high level, what the certification believes an informed candidate should understand about auditing processes, governance, system development, operations, and protection of information assets. That matters because preparation becomes more strategic when you can place each topic inside a larger structure. A learner who studies from a map tends to build stronger memory and clearer judgment than a learner who simply collects notes, because each concept has a place and a purpose rather than floating alone in isolation. Once you have that map, the next major resource is the main body of study content that explains the concepts in a fuller way. Whether that content comes from a formal review manual, a trusted study text, or another well-structured source, its job is to teach the reasoning behind the domains rather than merely naming them. This kind of resource is where beginners usually build the deepest foundation because it gives context, definitions, explanations, and examples that make the exam language easier to follow. A good study text does not just say that controls matter. It helps you understand why controls exist, how they relate to risk, how audit work evaluates them, and why management cares about whether they are designed and operating effectively. That fuller explanation is important because the exam often tests understanding indirectly. If you only memorize short definitions, you may recognize familiar words, but still miss the meaning of the question. A deeper teaching resource helps prevent that shallow kind of preparation. Practice questions are another major resource, but they are most useful when treated as a tool for diagnosis rather than a shortcut to passing. Many beginners love practice questions because they feel active and measurable, and there is nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when questions replace learning instead of reinforcing it. A question bank can show you where your understanding is weak, whether you are misreading certain patterns, and whether you are choosing answers for the right reasons or only because they sound familiar. It can also help you get comfortable with the style of judgment the exam often demands. What it cannot do by itself is build the underlying framework that helps you reason through unfamiliar situations. When used well, practice questions are like a mirror that reflects your current level of understanding. When used poorly, they can encourage pattern recognition without mastery, which feels good in the short term but often collapses when the wording changes or the scenario becomes less predictable. Terminology resources are also more important than they first appear, especially for a certification that depends heavily on precision of meaning. In a field like this, small differences between terms can lead to very different conclusions about roles, responsibilities, evidence, and risk. A beginner may read two words that sound similar and assume they are interchangeable, only to discover later that the distinction is central to the question. That is why glossaries, concept summaries, and clear explanations of common audit and governance language can be so helpful. They train your ear and your judgment at the same time. Over time, strong candidates stop translating every term into vague, everyday language and start hearing the specific professional meaning more naturally. This reduces confusion and improves confidence because the wording of the exam becomes less intimidating. It also helps in real professional settings, where precision matters whenever findings, responsibilities, or control expectations are being discussed. Community-based resources can also play a helpful role, though beginners should use them carefully. Study groups, local professional connections, recorded discussions, and peer conversations can make preparation feel less isolating and can expose you to ways of explaining concepts that click more easily than a textbook paragraph. Sometimes hearing another learner talk through a confusing topic helps you realize that your own uncertainty is normal and fixable. At the same time, not every shared explanation is accurate, and not every strong opinion is grounded in the exam's real logic. That means community resources work best when they support your understanding rather than define it. They can help you stay motivated, hear common sticking points, and compare reasoning styles, but they should not become your sole source of truth. The most useful learning communities encourage careful thinking, reference solid material, and make room for nuance instead of treating every topic as if it has a simple shortcut answer. There is also an administrative side of preparation that deserves attention because practical mistakes can undermine even good studying. Scheduling information, exam policies, identification requirements, rescheduling rules, and timing expectations may not sound exciting, but they are still key resources for exam readiness. A candidate who understands the logistical side of the process tends to arrive with more mental bandwidth available for the actual test. That matters because stress often increases when small uncertainties remain unresolved until the last moment. Knowing what the exam environment will generally feel like, how timing works, and what responsibilities fall on you as the candidate can make preparation feel more complete. It also reinforces a professional habit that fits the certification well. People in audit and assurance work are expected to pay attention to details, requirements, and evidence. Managing the exam process carefully is not separate from that mindset. It is an early expression of it. The smartest way to use these resources is not to pile them on top of one another until you feel overwhelmed. Instead, it helps to think of each resource as serving a distinct purpose in your preparation. The organization itself gives the certification its context and standards. The exam information tells you what the assessment expects and how it functions. The content outline gives you the map. The main study material builds your understanding. Practice questions reveal your weak spots. Terminology resources improve precision. Community support helps with motivation and perspective. When you see the resources this way, you stop chasing more material just because it exists. You start using material intentionally. That shift is important for beginners because too many candidates assume the person with the largest stack of resources is the most prepared, when in reality, the most prepared candidate is often the one who understands why each tool is being used and what problem it is meant to solve. A common mistake during exam preparation is confusing familiarity with readiness. A learner may watch many review videos, skim summaries, and answer scattered practice questions, then feel productive because the material seems increasingly recognizable. Recognition, however, is not the same as being able to reason through a question with confidence. Another common mistake is ignoring the source and tone of the material. If a resource constantly pushes memorization without context, it may leave you weak when the exam asks for judgment. If a resource is highly technical but disconnected from audit logic, it may fill your head with detail that does not improve performance. Some learners also make the error of hunting for perfect shortcuts, as if there must be a secret set of phrases that unlock every answer. The better path is slower but stronger. It involves building understanding, checking yourself honestly, and using resources that reinforce the way the certification expects you to think. As your preparation continues, understanding ISACA should help you see that this exam is part of a wider professional identity rather than an isolated hurdle. The certification is connected to a field that values careful analysis, ethical conduct, structured thinking, and the ability to communicate risk and control issues clearly. That means your resources are not just helping you pass a test. They are also introducing you to how professionals in this space read, reason, and evaluate. When used thoughtfully, the resources become more than study aids. They become a way of learning the language and habits of a discipline. This can make preparation feel more meaningful, especially for beginners who want to know whether the effort is worth it. Studying becomes easier to sustain when you realize that you are not only collecting exam points. You are learning how a respected profession frames technology oversight, evidence, governance, and trust. The big idea to carry forward is that knowing ISACA and knowing your resources are closely connected parts of successful preparation. The organization gives the certification its professional foundation, and the right resources help you understand that foundation in a usable way. Beginners often feel pressure to study harder, faster, and with more material, but a better approach is to study with clearer alignment. When your materials reflect the exam's purpose, language, and reasoning style, your effort becomes more efficient and your confidence becomes more legitimate. That is why understanding the organization matters from the very beginning. It helps you choose wisely, study with intention, and build the kind of knowledge that supports both exam success and long-term growth in the field. Once that mindset is in place, the preparation process becomes less about scrambling for answers and more about steadily developing sound professional judgment.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.